Hey guys, Michael here. It's a beautiful Friday in early August. Look outside. I'm in on my porch, really having a nice summer here, and with a couple of my dogs around here. We're about to go for a walk. As soon as we get through a review of the practice test 10 writing section for user Chubby Cat from Reddit, asked a question for help on explaining, and also, and this I like this request because Chubby Cat said, "Well, I got these wrong, but I want to know what can I do to avoid making the same mistake later." It's not just about fixing that one particular thing. So what I want to focus on is let's identify the rule to apply into the writing section. It's not just that there are only rules for punctuation. There's rules for logic. There's rules for sentence placement. There's rules for everything you do on this test. Even prepositions, which some people say are idiomatic. No, they're not. I use of distinctly from by, and there's a reason for it. There's a specific meaning given attached to that preposition. So again, what we're going to do is we're going to look at this and see, well, not only can we correct this particular question, but let's identify the rule that we use on each of the eliminations. All right, so off we go, and to practice test 10, I'm moving to the tablet. Okay, here we have practice test 10, students working on the writing section. So let's go down to the writing section here. And the first one we'll look at is number 2. Now, before we look at anything here, I just want to reinforce the idea that you have to pay attention to the titles. All right, so the closest we'll come to a thesis statement. It's the closest we're going to get to a general idea about what this passage is about. So these are heavily edited, these passages, and so they're all formatted according to them for the test. And so this is where we get an idea. And when we answer a question like number 2 here, which is about supporting the topic of the passage, well, guess what? This is the topic of the passage right here. It's about children's education and the cat in the hat. If you know what that is, that helps because it doesn't really talk about what the cat in the hat was. But we do know that this author, John Hersey, we can read, he wanted to make children's books more something. Okay, so we have more, and then it could be one of these things. Now, the larger context here, we could go through to figure it out because we don't know, if you don't know what the cat in the hat is and you don't really know how that changed education, but we do get a sense that it is an author, so it's someone who wrote a book. I think most of us know the cat in the hat, so we know it's an illustration to help kids learn how to read. I hated the cat in the hat when I was a kid, but whatever. Here we are with it. The only place it talks about it being an illustrated book is down here. And this is a long way to go for that context. So just assume we don't really fully have that. But all we got to go with is that the title is. We know that this is what it's about. So let's eliminate. It's not about a sense of wholeness. It's not education. Okay. It's, remember, we're according to the supporting the topic of the passage. It's not about learning starting with failure. If it is, maybe there's something in here about learning starting with failure. Doubtful. We can mark that to go back to. But if it is, that would be what we call an error of specificity, where in other words, it's just a small detail. And it's not about the overall topic of the passage. And so we're looking for a statement of generality. Now, in the reading section, sometimes you can make a mistake. Main point questions are looking for generalities. Other questions, they may offer you an incorrect answer that is a generality where you need a specificity. So we have errors of specificity and generality we need to pay attention to. But let's get rid of B. It's not about journalism. And it's not about history. Okay, so we're left with D. Now, again, we can see it down here is really the answer, but this is consistent with Children's Illustrators. This is a book about for children to change their education by this dude being an illustrator. Okay, that's where they kind of hid that, but I think we can eliminate down based upon the title. The next one we want to look at is number 7. All right, so here's good. I'm glad we're going to have a chance to review this because it's not punctuation, it's not grammar, but it still has a rule. It is still rules-based, this test, no matter the type of question. In this one, the rule which we're going to apply here is that we're looking for subject and verb matching. In other words, is the subject consistent with the verb, or does it send focus away to something else, right? So we're going to blur. So this is something that the SAT calls emphasis shift. Okay, are we shifting the emphasis or not? Okay, are we focusing on what we're looking for is precise and concise communication? So this is going to involve things like matching our subject to verb. Okay, so for example, the dog's teeth didn't bite the bone, the dog bit the bone, right? And so we want to make sure that we're saying the dog did it, the teeth, this is just not the point, right? I think they even had question on another one of these practice tests about a Chinese festival and the dragon's teeth and something like that. So it's the dragon, not the teeth, that did the biting. Anyway, we're also looking for what we call active voice. Active voice is, right, I gave the dog a bone. This is very straightforward. Subject, verb, object, and I have my indirect object here. So this is what we call a direct object. Would I give a bone? Who would I give it to? The dog. Okay, that's active voice. And this is the type of sentences we're interested in because this communicates better than unclear things such as the dog was given a bone. Okay, now you can look at this and say, all right, well, it's a verb, because this is a valid sentence, right? We can have a period that works. But what's going on here is this is actually not acting as a verb, it's acting as an adjective, because it's a subject complement to the dog, which is my in grammatically, this is the subject. This is a linking verb, and this is my subject complement adjective. However, if we think about this as an action, given as an action, there's no subject here. This is the indirect object. The dog was given a bone. What was it given? The direct object, bone, here, right? And then dog right here. Okay, there's no subject. So that's why passive voice, what we call passive voice, is unclear. And we want to avoid that. So we go, let's just apply that rule right in here. So rule 1 is PV, passive voice. Okay, here we have Giesel's story finally hit upon. All right, that's not necessarily passive voice, but that's actually this the rule 2, which is making sure we're matching our subject and verb properly. What hit? There's my verb. The story, Geisel is acting as an adjective here because the possessive noun is an adjective holding that possesses another noun. So sorry about that. So my dog's bone, the bone is the noun, and this is what we call an attributive noun, but it's a possessive noun, but it's acting as an adjective because this is describing the bone. Whose bone? The dog's bone. Whose story? Geisel's story. So this is actually acting as a modifier, an adjective modifier. So this is my subject. Well, the subject didn't hit the image, so that's using rule 2. We get rid of that one, and we do the same thing. The story was finally basically hit upon, an image that the guys will hit upon. Okay, these are passive voice here. Okay, so this is rule 1, passive voice. Rule 2 is that this has the wrong subject with the verb. Get rid of A. An image that guys will finally hit upon. Okay, see how the image was hit upon, an image that guys will finally hit upon became the basis of the story. Why is this? The image is what he hits. This is an object. This is our Geisel's doing the hitting. So we want to put that in front. So here works. Geisel finally hit upon subject, verb, object. Okay. And the story was finally. So here again we have passive voice here again. So we get rid of that. This is the same construction. The story was finally based upon. That Geisel hit upon. So that, by the way, it's just based on an image that guys will hit upon. So so this is kind of, it's not straightforward. I think the real rule here is we want our language to be straightforward, which is subject, verb, object. Okay, and avoiding clauses, separating verbs and subjects with too much parenthetical information, so on and so forth. Okay, so when you think about these, think about emphasis shift. Is the emphasis correct? Is my verb really attached to the subject, attached to the right subject, right? Think about, are we being precise in our language by using active, not passive voice? Next one is number 19. 14, so this is going to a different passage here. Let's go back to the title of this one. Sorry, I missed it. Number 19, keep student volunteering voluntary. That should help us with at least one question, sometimes more. This is what this is about. Let's go to this question 19. So here we have punctuation. Okay, so we got to think in terms of the rules. Okay, now before we get into the rules regarding this one, I want my students to always find the subjects and verbs in a sentence. Okay, so subject and verb are what create a clause. They also create a sentence. Every sentence has a subject and a verb. A sentence equals a subject and a verb, what we call predicate, and is a complete thought. So this is a sentence. I go is a sentence. Not a very good one, but it is a sentence. I go. All right. Given context, you could be, are you going? I go. Or do you go? I go. Whatever. That is a sentence. It's got a subject and a verb, and it could be a complete thought. That would be a thought. Okay. Now, a clause has a subject and a verb and is part of a larger sentence. In other words, I go, comma, and I do, right? That's two sentences, I go, period, I do, combined into a compound sentence that has two independent clauses. Now, in our clauses, so we have a couple types. We have an independent clause, which has got a subject and a verb, and it could be a complete thought by itself. In other words, it could be a sentence if it was by itself. And now there's different forms of dependent clauses. So we have what we call a subordinate clause. We have a relative clause, noun clause, all kinds of things. These things are not the main clause of the sentence, and they generally, noun clauses are a little bit different, but they generally cannot stand as a sentence by themselves. By the way, noun clauses, there's very rarely is that being tested on this test, but sometimes it happens. Hit me up outside of this video if you wanted me to go over noun clauses. Maybe I should do one on that. All right, so let's get to what we go on here. So we know, so the reason for this is the first rule is when I see a semicolon, a period, and a semicolon, all right? I know that for a period, I have to have a sentence and a sentence. So a sentence is what? It's got a subject and a verb, and it's a complete thought, okay? For a semicolon, I have to have independent clauses, right? Independent clause, right? And here's a comma, right? We're going to worry about that in a minute. I'm going to look at the semicolons and the periods because I see there are two semicolons. So clearly, these all grammatically do the same thing. These independent clauses could be sentences, so I could replace the semicolon with a period, or I could replace a period with a semicolon. Grammatically does the exact same thing. There's a reason for this. The reason, by the way, is you want to separate the thoughts, and this one wants to compare the thoughts, usually for contrast, not always, but you want to bring them in together. Now, when I look at that, so I must have an independent clause here, a sentence here, and an independent clause here. All right, now I go to my sentence here. She found what she found. She found the students. Which students? The ones who required to volunteer. Students rushed to complete their service hours. Blah, blah, blah. Okay, I'm getting rid of the noise. So she found, subject, verb. And then notice I have who were required, subject, verb, rushed, verb. That's the students rushed, and so on and so forth. It's a complex sentence, but all I need to know is this is a sentence. She found something. She found that they complete their service hours. So I have an independent clause here. That's cool. Now I look over, do I have one here? I need to have an independent clause here. I need to have a sentence here. I need to have an independent clause here. This is working on rule 1. All right, and then I have my break. They then did, all right, subject, verb, that works. So I can't eliminate any of those based upon that. So now I want to take a peek at this comma here. Now, oh, by the way, I did isolate that I do have an independent clause here, right? So my comma, notice I have they then did, subject, verb, okay? So that's an independent clause with a comma. And I know I had a subject, verb, independent clause prior to the comma. So here's rule 2. Okay, rule 2 is how do I combine independent clauses using a comma? Well, I need to add a coordinating conjunction, and that's what your teachers call fanboys. I'd like to really explain what a coordinating conjunction is. So it's coordinating conjunction because there's a reason why it's called that, conjunction. Okay, sorry, my handwriting, but you can see the coordinating conjunction. What it does, it coordinates like things. So noun and noun, right? Yes or no. These are similarly why or no, right? These are all grammatically similar parts. Also, independent clause, comma, and independent clause. It's coordinating my independent clauses. Now, notice I cannot coordinate an independent clause with a dependent clause. So I need to have just a comma because I'm no longer coordinating like parts. I have a dependent clause and an independent clause, so I don't coordinate them. I just connect them with a pause. Now here, since I have an independent clause, she found that, what? And then they then did. I have two independent clauses that only have a comma. There's no coordinating conjunction there, so this is wrong. That's my second elimination using rule 2. Now, the next thing I want to do is rule 3. Okay, now, so I have school, they then, comma, they, comma, then, they then, no comma here. Now, I can just forget about all this business and just start here. They then did, and recognize what's going on here. They, subject, verb. Okay, so subject, verb. I cannot separate my subject from my verb by a single comma. I don't put a pause. I don't put a colon. I don't put a semicolon there. I could put, however, 2 commas or 2 parentheses in between. That's just interrupting my subject and verb. But my subject and verb must not be otherwise separated by punctuation. So notice here I have subject, comma, verb, subject, comma, verb. These are both wrong. So I go with D, they, then. Okay. So again, I'm applying a rule. So my first rule is, do I have independent clauses? Do I have sentences on either side? Oh, I do. So this one isn't combining them properly. So I get rid of A. Rule 3 is something getting in the way of my subject and verb. This is why I strongly recommend that students focus on identifying subjects and verbs and seeing if they're part of what we call the main clause, which is an independent clause, or are they part of dependent clauses, which are used to modify my main clause? Or do I have two independent clauses, so on and so forth? Alrighty, so let's move on to the next one. I'm going to work on 18. Oh, it's 20. Okay, so let's go see what's going on with 20. Now let's get rid of all my mess here. So let me just restart this. All right, so I'm going to start fresh here on the page 20. Okay, now there's a general rule. I like to call it an 80-20 rule. It could be a 60-40. Is that the shortest answer is the best answer? Well, that's okay. It's a rule when you're looking at certain sentences, but there's a 20% of the time it's not. And that's when we're dealing with comparisons. Because comparisons have a different set of rules from, say, just general avoiding wordiness, using too many words, repeating nouns, pronouns uselessly, and what we call redundancy. There's a lot of like sentence combining questions that they add redundancy in, or they add unnecessary pronouns. They keep independent clauses when they could really just shorten the second independent clause into dependent clause and avoid the repetition of the subject. So that's that 80% where the shortest one is most likely the correct answer. But when it comes to comparisons, the shortest one is probably not. It could be, but it's probably not. But now how do we know it's a comparison? Because of the word than. All right, so we got than. And I notice this one doesn't have the word than. So I'm wondering right off the bat, without the word than, is it a comparison? It could be. Compared with, it would seem to be. But let's check out the rules for comparisons. Comparisons must have parallel structure. In other words, they must, like according to conjunction, they must compare like items. A to B, I can't have apples and oranges. I have to, in terms of grammar, I can't be comparing an object to a subject, or I can't be comparing a verb to a noun. So I need to be comparing like things, A1A, 2A, right? So it has to be a similar grammatical form that I'm comparing. So we see, let's use that as rule 1. Are we comparing in a parallel way? So rule 1 is parallelism, right? So we have they, students, right? So who's the they? Always find the pronoun. And where do we have students? Right here is my pronoun. Sorry. Always attach the pronoun to the antecedent and put the antecedent back in. So students then did significantly less regular volunteer work. So we're comparing the students, what they did in 12th grade, than the service hours. This one is comparing service hours to students, so we get rid of that. So there's no parallel structure. And when I look down here, I see C does the same thing. I'm comparing students. They did less work than hours work. So I'm comparing students to hours there. I get rid of C as well. All right. Now, we look at this and I go, well, this is then did students who were and compared with. Let's see if we can eliminate this one first. They then did, okay, students, okay, the students, this then did, that's fine. That's this, I got this kind of backwards. My students did, which students who were not required to volunteer. So this did is parallel. It's okay. I cannot eliminate this. Now, you and I would never say this. We'd probably do this. Hey, they did less volunteer work compared with students who did not, blah, blah, blah. This is an informal use, but it's technically incorrect because we already have the word less in here, which is synonymous with compared. Also, I want to maintain a parallel use of the word did to make it more grammatically complete and make sure my grammatical constructions are actually similar in my comparison. So that's why we go with B. Okay, it's a little harder to see that less is redundant with compared, but that is actually the case. Let's move on to number 39. So we're skipping a passage, it looks like. What's this passage here? Marsupials lend a hand to science. Student got none wrong on there. Great job, because I think there's a pretty tough one in here. This one, I've seen students get that one wrong a lot. But we're going to jump in. to number 39, and we're doing an employee benefit that benefits employees. So what do we know? The focus, the main topic here is something that benefits employers. So it could be anything, but in this case, it's a benefit for employees that benefits employers. We want to focus on employers and what the benefits to them are. But let's find 39. All right, so here we go. We're dealing with punctuation. All right, and I want to see how are these similar, how are they different. Okay, this one has a period. So I got sentence 1, sentence 2 separated by a period. Here I have a colon. Here I have no punctuation. Here I have a semicolon. All right, now let's say I'm walking along. I'm really tired. You know, I've been walking with the dogs. Me and the dogs are walking along, right? I'm hungry. I'm thirsty, and I look up and I see this beautiful apple up here, right? Like, wow, I'd love to get that apple. Nice. But it's way up. I'm tired. I can't climb up that tree. But meanwhile, there are a couple little teeny crappy apples down here. I may as well go for these. These are called the low hanging fruit. Okay. In other words, these are the easy ones. Go for the easy ones. Get the easy eliminations out of the way. So here, I just have to have a sentence and verb and a complete thought, sentence, verb, and a complete thought. So rule 1. What makes a sentence has to have subject and a verb and have a complete thought, and they're separated by a period. So I look at this one here. Employees, here's my last period. Employees whose tuition is reimbursed often stay with their employer even after they complete their degrees. All right, so employees, subject, stay, verb. Notice how whose tuition is, this is a subject. I'm sorry, is a verb here and a subject here. This is a relative clause, so I can ignore that. Subject verb matching is so important on this test, but employees stay with their employer. Okay, that's my subject, my sentence. So I do have a sentence here. Sentence 1, got it. Okay, do I have a sentence on this side? Because their new qualification give them. Okay, so I have a subject, excuse me, I have a verb here. New qualifications, subject qualifications give them, subject verb. But this is a complete thought. Because their new qualifications give them opportunities for advancement within the company is not a complete thought. It's just like I say, because it's raining, period. You're like, Michael, are you answering a question? Because I didn't ask you a question. What do you mean because it's raining? Oh, then maybe we shouldn't go out for a walk right now. Okay, so it's not a complete thought. So this is starting with the subordinated conjunction because it subordinates an independent clause, which would otherwise be fine. Their new qualifications give them, but add the word because, and that subordinates this into a dependent clause, which cannot stand as a sentence. So I get rid of A because I do not have a sentence here using rule 1. Now, that tells me that this is wrong too, because I would need an independent clause on both sides. So I get rid of A and D. Notice how those eliminations can work equally, because a period and a semicolon do the same thing in terms of the grammatical forms of what's on either side. Just they're interchangeable. Now I got to decide between these two. Do I need a colon here or not? Now, just a word on colons. Colons must be preceded with an independent clause. So I have that here. That's cool. Okay, I can do that. So I can't eliminate. That's rule 2. Can I eliminate with the independent clause before the colon? No, I can't. So that's okay. All right, now my rule 3 is going to be a little more tricky. Now, a colon can be followed by anything grammatically, pretty much, but it must be preceded by an independent clause. And by the way, same thing with a dash, independent clause. Usually, however, this is going to be for emphasis. There's no dash here, so I'm not worrying about it. I'm just throwing this in on the side, okay? And dashes, by the way, also act as parenthetically, like 2 commas, 2 parentheses. So we won't worry about dashes right now. Just to throw that in to remind you. But a colon can be followed by anything except usually something with another colon. I don't know if that would work. Haven't really thought about it. But in any case, it doesn't matter what's on this side. I can't eliminate on the other side of the colon because it's cool. Anything goes. So, but what I do need to look at this going, well, wait a minute, is my colon as a pause, right? Is it part of this larger sentence? Is it giving an example, or is it somehow inappropriately separated one from the other? Now, this is an important concept. It'll hit a few questions on each test, okay? So we have something called a restrictive grammatical element, okay? I'll call it element. It could be a clause, phrase, could be, you know, we can think of like subjects and verbs are restrictive. And what that means is that they are essential. I'll just say it's essential to the sentence. Okay. So a restrictive element, therefore, if I remove it, the sentence is no longer sensical. Okay. A non-restrictive element I can't type, I can't write, sorry, element, okay? If you remove it, equals, it's okay. The sentence doesn't change that much. So if I it's not essential to the sentence. So let's give an example of a restrictive element. So if I say dogs, let's say the dogs are dogs, let's say dogs are nice. Okay, let's start with that. That's a sentence. Dogs, subject, verb, it's a linking verb, subject, complement, nice. Okay, so I have a sentence there. Okay, that's not a very complete thought, is it? What I really mean to say is dogs I like are nice. Notice that this dogs I like, this is a relative clause because it's assuming the word that is in there. Dogs that I like are nice. Okay. This is a totally different idea. This tells me dogs are nice. No, it's the ones that are the nice are the ones that I like. So I'm saying a different thing. That is a restrictive element. So there's no punctuation in there. Okay. So, but if I say I gave the dog a bone, comma, which made him happy. Okay. If I remove this from my sentence, I still have a core piece of my sentence that makes sense. I gave the dog a bone, which made him happy. So that comma is appropriate there. In fact, it'd be inappropriate to not have the comma because then that would sort of run these two clauses into each other. The word which generally introduces non-restricted elements, and the word that generally introduces restrictive elements. Not always, but generally. Dogs that are nice, right? Blah, blah, blah. I could say which in that case, but I couldn't say I gave the dog a bone that made him happy. That's saying something completely different than if I do comma, which made him happy, because then I'm saying that the bone made him happy as opposed to giving him the bone is what made him happy here in my using it as a non-restrictive element. Okay, so given all that, do I need the word because for the sentence to make sense? So employees often stay with their employer even after they complete the degrees. Okay, that's a statement. That's fine. It's an independent clause. It's a sentence. Because. Now, is this colon setting up an example, an explanation? No, it's giving us a required reason for why they stay. Because their new qualifications give them opportunities for advancement. Okay, it's not an example. So I have to go with C, not D, B, because I don't want that pause, which is separating a restrictive or an essential element to the sentence. Hope that makes sense. We used a couple different rules, rule 1, 2, 3, in order to eliminate all these. So again, it always starts with finding that subject and verb. Last one we're going to look at here is 42. All right, this one here, 42. Now, I see this is the shortest one, right? Remember my 80-20 rule? Is this a comparison? Businesses have succeeded in minimizing and keeping. No, I look at this, I go, wait a minute, this is about redundancies, right? Minimizing and keeping down. Keeping down is equal to minimizing, so A is wrong, right? Minimizing costs associated with employees' coursework. Well, here's employees' coursework. I can't eliminate that because it's not underlined, so this would be redundant, get rid of that. Now, being, here's the second rule. So rule 1 is redundancy. Rule 2 is the word being. Okay, just on spec, 100% of the time, being is wrong. Okay, that's a 100% rule. Whenever they offer that word being as a possible answer, it's always wrong. If there's been one, please let me know. I've never seen it, but we just, let's make it a 99% rule. But I'm pretty sure anytime they put being in there, it's wrong. Now, why is being effective redundant? It's wrong generally because it's unclear. It's passive voice. Is why it's wrong. That's really what's going on here. This is passive voice, but being effective. This is seen by ensuring replenishment by offering fixed amounts each year and blah blah blah. Oh, businesses have succeeded is in minimizing keeping down costs. So that's redundant. So we go with the shortest one, and it's the most direct anyway. Businesses succeeded in keeping down costs. Bam. Okay. Now I think the big ideas here is identify, ID the subject and verb. Okay. Right. That and even on some of these, these types of questions, or the one where we're asked to choose a different set of wordings, we got to find that subject and verb and see if we're using active voice, right, or passive voice, right. See if we have multiple clauses. Do we have an independent clause, a dependent clause, so on and so forth. And then once we know what's going on in the sentence, we're a whole of it looking at that subject and verb, and then we eliminate using our rules. Hope that helps, my friend Chubby Cat. And let me know any other questions. I hope this is clear. If I could beg your attention on one more thing I saw here, I just want to really show this. This is an interesting sentence, and I really want you to see the grammatical form that's going on here. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to turn off the draw. I'm going to put this into, I'm going to copy that, okay? I'm going to diagram this, but let's just talk about what this sentence is doing first, okay? This is just an aside, so this is my PS, and no longer talking about the test, but I want you to be able to identify complex sentences like this. So I look at this, I see a verb, right? A verb, stay, a verb, complete, okay? I got 3 verbs. Now, that's kind of weird. So employees whose tuition is reimbursed, whose tuition is reimbursed, that's my subject who is here. Employees whose, because this is a restrictive relative clause, because it's telling us which employees often stay with their employer. So this is a restrictive clause here, okay? But it's a clause because it's got a subject. My pronoun reference is referring to employees. Tuition is whose tuition. Actually, there's my subject, tuition here. Excuse me. This is it's defining who owns the tuition. The subject, tuition is reimbursed, right? Whose tuition? Well, the employees. Now, here's my verb stay. That would be employees, subject. So notice how I got this clause stuck inside this other clause, and then I have even often stay with their employer even after they subject verb here. Okay, so this is a rather unique complex sentence. Sometimes it's not being measured in this test right here, but you will frequently be measured on it. So let's look at it as a diagram so we can make sense of it here. Just do this real quickly. I got this cool program. It's called Sentence Diagrammer. It's available in the Windows Store. So I think I got that down here, complete there. Let's see what the diagrammer does with that. Notice what the diagrammer does. What's my core sentence, my main clause right at the top, subject, verb, okay? Employees stay. Now, and then I told you that this is a relative clause connected by the word whose. Whose is referring to employees. See how that's connected there? So this whose is defining the tuition, which is the subject of my relative clause here. It's called a relative, or sometimes it's called an adjective clause because it's defining employees, and it's requisite information, thus no punctuation. And then we connect this other, we go through this, which ones they stay often with their employer. So I have all these prepositional phrases, and I have my adverb even and often. And so these with their employer, this is my preposition. This is all just adding information to my main clause, which is employees stay. And now we do after they, subject, verb, complete their degrees. All right, so this is a great way. If you do see a complex sentence, this diagrammer can really help you to isolate the different elements, especially those relative clauses on a compound sentence.